Welcome people, it's me OGDuffy and we're looking at Star Wars, the Atari years. The Atari VCS was originally released in 1977, which just so happens to be the same year as the history-changing cinematic masterpiece that is Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope. My personal memories of the Atari VCS are from the early 80s, and the Atari VCS 2600 was just an amazing console. Prior to the Spectrum and the Commodore 64, this was the go-to system for us, although we deemed it expensive for the time. The concept of cartridge-based games was a huge point of interest, and it made for some amazing game memories. So it's very befitting that the first ever video game release with an official Star Wars theme was released on the Atari VCS 2600. That title being The Empire Strikes Back. Not only was this the first Star Wars video game released, but also happens to be one of OGDuffy's personal favourite Star Wars films. The game was released by Parker Brothers in 1982, who also released Frogger on the same system and around the same time, with both of these titles for Parker Brothers shifting over 3 million copies combined, making them some of the biggest selling home titles of that year. Set in the iconic Hoth battle scene, which sees you flying a snow speeder and attempting to halt the AT-ATs as they march onwards to destroy the rebel stronghold of Echo Base. Personally, I have memories of playing this game, which I did not own, but I can recall hiring it from a video shop. I recall how impressed I was at such a young age as the snow speeder and the AT-ATs looked awesome to the young OGDuffy. The sound impressed me too, with a basic rendition of the Star Wars theme, the menacing stomps of the impending AT-ATs, and of course the laser blast from my ship took my imagination into the Star Wars universe, and all this in the comfort of my own home. To me, Empire Strikes Back on the Atari VCS was just amazing. Now we jump to January 1983, and again Parker Brothers released the second Star Wars game in video game history, but this was the first ever to feature a lightsaber. Star Wars Jedi Arena. Players would control their lightsaber using the Atari paddle controllers to defend themselves from laser blasts emitting from the Jedi training seeker ball, which would blast away until your shield had gone down to 0, which then led to the final strike, declaring the winner, the one left standing, as the Jedi Master. If only Jedi training to become a Master was really this simple. Someone should have told Luke about this game. It'd have saved him a lot of effort. A few months on, in 1983, saw the release of the most iconic Atari Star Wars game of all time, and, in my opinion, one of, if not the greatest arcade game of all time. But that's a debate all in itself. The amazing Atari Star Wars. Not only were the vector graphics amazing, but the sampled speech and sound effects taken directly from the film put you directly in the seat of the X-Wing fighter, and as close as you could get to the real thing. For this time there was an amazing breakthrough. Battling TIE fighters, destroying the Death Star turrets as you approached a trench run for the final destruction of the Death Star itself. What helped in creating this amazing experience was the cockpit it sat in and the amazing yolk controller that added to the overall experience. Although the stand-up cab was not as immersive as the cockpit, it still gave an amazing experience. A truly outstanding game that if you get the chance to play today will stand out even after all these years. The force is certainly strong with this Atari arcade game. And of course, this classic game would see a home conversion onto the VCS 2600 and the 5200, which again saw Parker Brothers release this. Obviously it was no match for the arcade game, and it certainly pushed the VCS to the max, which really didn't look too bad considering the system's limitations. Obviously the 5200 version looked vastly better than the VCS, but the flaw on both systems was the controls. Using a joystick was no comparison compared to the yolk controller of the arcade classic. Jumping forward a few months and returning to the VCS 2600 console with another Parker Brothers game. This time jumping to the third film in the franchise, Return of the Jedi, Death Star Battle. It sees you piloting the iconic Millennium Falcon, where over several levels you have to destroy the Death Star. Firstly, battling TIE fighters while awaiting an opening through the force field. That, when timed correctly, leads to a nice 3D cutscene. Then finally, you have to destroy the semi-built Death Star whilst blasting a channel through to the core, all the time avoiding the Death Star's menacing ray and the TIE fighters. And when destroyed, guess what? Yes, you know, it starts all over again, albeit harder. All in all, an enjoyable little game that sticks to the film's formula nicely. We now jump back into the arcade and move into 1984, which see Atari release The Return of the Jedi. Sticking to the favoured yolk control system, they moved away from the vector graphics and opted for raster graphics that were bright and engaging, and again used sampled speech from the film, which added to the overall experience. Released as a stand-up cabinet, it looked ultra modern and fitted the film tie-in really well. Levels would flip between the speeder bikes, battle on Endor, and piloting the Falcon to destroy the Death Star, and you would then manically have to pilot out to escape the explosion. A third level would see the action skip between Chewbacca piloting an AT-ST on Endor, and then you having to fly the Falcon in attacking a Star Destroyer before entering the Death Star stage once more. This never saw a conversion onto the Atari consoles of the day, but it did get a release on one of the Atari's home computer systems, the Atari ST, which was released by Domark in 1988. Not as graphically as impressive as the arcade version, obviously, but it was decent enough. But the one thing it lacked was the digitised speech of the arcade machine. For me, the arcade game was a great addition to the Star Wars games. It was graphically bright and very different to their original Vector game release. As much as I like this and I enjoy this game, I can only imagine what they could have done with a Jabba the Hutt level, one of my favourite scenes in the whole Star Wars franchise. I really don't know why. And our final jump from hyperspace sees us landing in 1985 with the Atari arcade release of Empire Strikes Back. This saw a return to the original arcade game with the use of vector graphics and digitised speech again from the film. The yolk controller also made a welcome return. As gameplay goes, personally, this for me was not as good as the original Star Wars arcade game, and I found in particular the asteroid field level was rather dull and I felt lazy on the programmer's part. This was not as popular as a game either, as Atari released it as a kit to arcade owners who could then convert their Star Wars machines into the Empire Strikes Back video game. But many arcade operators were still earning well for the original Star Wars machines, so they chose to stick with the original rather than forking out cash to convert to another game. That quite honestly was just not as good. This was not released on the Atari consoles either, but again it saw a release on the Atari ST home computer, which was again done by Domark in 1988. This time though, it featured some of the digitised speech. It looked good too, but when the screen got busy, the game would slow down painfully. So, jumping back into hyperspace and returning home, I hope you enjoyed revisiting Star Wars the Atari years, and please do let me know in the comments your memories, thoughts, and if you would like me to continue this Star Wars video game timeline. Hit the like, and if you don't already do so, please hit that subscribe and the bell as well so you get future content notifications. And finally, a massive thank you to all of those that subscribe to my channel. You're awesome, and I really can't thank you enough for all your support. And finally, from me, OGDuffy, there really is only one thing left to say.
The Force will be with you, always.